welcome to the presentation on Clean Core. I'm sure all of you have heard this over and over again now in the presentations earlier at different conferences or different SAP marketing. You'll hear Clean Core more and more. It's becoming quite a buzzword. My name is Stephen Mason. I work at Aicomp, one of the partners here. And as my position with Head of New Products, this is a very important topic to me because as we transition our products to our next gen architectures, integrating into the SAP system in a clean core way is a very important and piece of our strategy. So this is very important to me. I'm happy to answer questions on this. It's something we're thinking about a lot as we build our integration strategies. So for the agenda today, really, first I want to kind of give a quick overview of why do we want to do Clean Core at all. So I mean, we will get into the details of Clean Core, but I think to really concentrate on why Clean Core is what it is, you really need to know why you want to have it in general. What is the benefits? Then we're going to dive into some of the extensibility options that are newer in SAP that provide this ability that wasn't there before to really build a clean core. And then also we want to talk about if you are already an SAP customer, you're already running an SAP system, what's your path to getting to clean core? What is that? Where are we trying to go on your systems to get to that clean core path where you feel like you have the agility you need? And then finally, we kind of want to go over what we're doing at Aicomp in order to implement this clean core approach. So pretty much everyone who's been on an SAP product or SAP project knows that one of the first parts of the implementation is we're going to use standard processes. We're going to use the best practices. SAP's invested a lot of time into these practices, but it's always very hard to actually do once you're on a project, right? Oftentimes, the business pushes back. They want things the way it used to be or the way they've always done it. And so this idea of clean or keeping those best practices goes away quickly. But the problem with that is you're missing the clean core right off the start. So this concept of clean core, it may not have been called clean core, has been around since the beginning of SAP, right? You really want to take those best practices, start with that standardization and stay with it, not keep on incrementally moving towards a business process that's unique to yourself. And coming to this, there's not just one dimension. We're not just talking about how you extend your system. We're really talking about many dimensions of your system and what's important. And so processes, we want those standard processes. We want that agility to adopt new processes that come out. We don't want to have to constantly reconsider the processes that we've meddled with and created a mess for us to move forward. Operations, you want to be able to continually update your systems, be able to work quickly with your IT team, and not be always having to come up with a solution to fix your previous solution, to fix your previous solution type thing. Extensibility, you want your extensions to your system where you do find value to be able to be upgraded properly. All of your integration systems not have to be decoupled from that extensibility. Data is probably one of the most important things these days. We're trying to build good reporting, large data structures to give good decision making. Also now with AI, I know it's everyone's talking about, but one of the key things with AI is good data, right? So if you allow your data to get dirty over time, or even at the beginning of the project, you don't put that time in to clean that data, you're way off clean core. And if you notice, almost everything I've said, minus the extensibility, has been part of your implementation process with SAP from the beginning. But nowadays, as we're moving to the cloud, we're integrating with more and more systems, that cleanliness is more important than ever, right? So, yeah. So again, that time of business process that remains stale for years and years and years has gone away, right? We're constantly having to adapt to new things in the market, and you want to be able to adapt when the software vendors that you work with provide those solutions. if you've customized those solutions to your needs or to what you think are your needs, when they're not, when they're really just a variation, what you're doing is you're then greatly slowing down your ability to adapt to those new processes and take advantage of what your software vendors that you pay for already are providing you. Access to latest technology, AI, better user interface. It used to be mobile, now it's AI, maybe it was data analytics. And it could be now integrations with best of breed products that you want to use, but you still have your overall product in different places. So you want to be able to upgrade your current technology. You want to be able to integrate with new technology. If you've messed with your core, that makes it much more difficult. It makes that decision process much harder. Or it might end up with projects that you thought were going to be successful, but because of your customizations, they're not. Security, also a very big thing these days. As more and more stuff is in the cloud, you want to be able to have your products up to the latest levels for that security. If you are, again, causing that upgrade cycles to go, be farther and farther back in your upgrade cycles because of a lack of cleanliness, again, you're not having the security. The next thing to me is one of the biggest selling points of a clean core. You're paying your vendors for a product that is tested by them extensively. I mean, SAP being a good example, right? So as soon as you've meddled with a process and extended it, you are now taking that responsibility to your IT team to test that process every time you have an upgrade cycle, every time you integrate something new. So that's really you're creating a more brittle structure then, right? Because now the more and more those extensions continue to your system, you end up having this infrastructure that requires a lot of testing cycles of your testing, not SAP's time, not we're a software vendor, not Aicomp's time, your time to make sure that your infrastructure still works. So by staying clean, you're not taking on that additional efforts. And then again, we've mentioned this probably should be number one, but if you're wanting to move to the cloud or even parts of your systems to the cloud, you have to be cleanly just to get into the cloud, right? That's by nature of the cloud systems is required. Okay, so we're gonna dive a little bit, as mentioned, a lot of these topics, you guys are all very familiar with them. Talk about data, talk about processes, things like that. But really as SAP's offered your cloud products for a while now, what are they innovating on to provide you better extensibility options? And to really explain that, I think we need to start with what classic ABAP extension, what you might have worked on in the past, why they aren't positive or why we're trying to move away from them, right? So oftentimes, even if you were following guidelines of extensions, you might have been using baddies or extension points, and that's great, and that is a good starting point. But oftentimes, you still coupled your code, and that sounds like a opaque software engineering term. But the idea is you're directly using pieces of the SAP system, right? So it might be even something as simple as a data element, or it might be something like an SQL table, which we all know we shouldn't be doing it, or it could be more likely a function module that SAP provides, and you go, hey, that already does what I want to do. I'm going to go ahead and use that. Well, the problem is as soon as you've done that, now your code is relying on SAP. SAP has not signed any contract saying they won't change that code. So that means, many of you probably have been through this, during an upgrade cycle, you need to now check, did my code change? Is there code that SAP's done that's caused a problem? And that's that strong coupling. And the idea with where we're trying to get to is reducing that coupling, separating the code, or really your code is an independent unit. Even if it's running on the same stack, it's not relying on SAP's code, except for in places that we have a contract basically between us and SAP that code is going to remain consistent. And then one thing that, from our perspective as a vendor, is the idea that the ABAP stack is people at different companies are going to have different versions of an ABAP stack because their upgrade cycles are different. And so what this causes us is we as a vendor can only supply code directly into your system at the ABAP stack that our least customer is at, which then halts innovation from our perspective as well. So, this is our classic ABAP. This is what we're trying to move away from. With clean core, there's several options with extensibility, and these are tiers that SAP has come up with to describe how you might approach this. So tier 1 is where we want to be. That is clean. And there's two real flavors of that. One is a side-by-side application. That's kind of been, since S4 HANA Cloud has been out, that's been the go-to and really what's been available, and also what we're taking advantage of in a big way. But recent innovations, and this is where it becomes more interesting, and things now are becoming more and more possible for a lot of customers who might have said, I can't go into SAP. SAP Cloud doesn't offer enough customizations for us to get to what our business processes that we need. And that's where the on-stack extensibility comes in. And this is where you're able to build things in ABAP using what used to be called embedded steampunk. You probably heard that more than the developer extensibility. It's the same thing. And the idea there is you're still building stuff on the same system or on the same ABAP stack that you're running your S4 system in, but it's divided. You're not building things directly integrated with the SAP. You can't use a function module that SAP just happens to have. You might be able to see it, but you can't use it. You can't use a data element. You have to recreate those things. What you can use are what they consider released APIs. So S4 systems have always had publicly released APIs that you could integrate with, whether they're SOAP, OData, whatever. But now they're offering way more integrations. So this is business objects. You may have heard the RESTful ABAP programming, you've heard that wrap, you've heard those terms. SAP is building these business objects that are then being released on, and you can find these on, and we'll give you that resource later, on the API Business Hub. You can see what they've released. They have a contract on that. They will deprecate them over time, but that gives you time to adjust, to the new code that they're releasing. But when you're touching that, that is going to behave that same way. They are going to test that behavior just like they would test a UI or things like that. So that if you integrate with that, you don't have to worry about that the next upgrade cycle. That suddenly where they added something to that function module. Now my code is dumping in my system, right? So that's where the developer on Stack gives you those additional private APIs, I would call them, within the on Stack that you don't have access to. There's other things like baddies. So you have baddies classic baddies you have. They're now releasing some of those, so you can then get into that process just like you were able to on an S4 system. But once again, even though you can do that baddie, you can't use that SAP object as a reference. You can't use a data, you can't use a function model in that baddie. So now you're in your own space, and that makes it clean. Tier 2 is not really applicable to a cloud client. That's applicable to an on-premise or a private cloud client, where you still have the ability to do things in your customer namespace. So that when you're doing a tier 2, you are not clean, but it's a bridge. The idea there is that you've worked with SAP. SAP on their API Business Hub has a form to say, hey, this is what we need. They can guide you with where they're going. This is what we're expecting to provide over time. And then the idea there is that you can say, okay, I know this is coming, so then I'm going to wrap some of their current BAPIs or things that will eventually be released, or some version of it. I will make my own kind of API and consume that in my tier 1 on Stack or side by side. And then over time, as SAP releases those business objects or baddies or whatever it is that you're trying to work with, then you can update just that portion of the code to now be on the green side of our tier stack. So that's tier 2. It's really a bridge. It's not clean, but it's on that process. If you're on an on-premise system, you're trying to get clean, that's one of your steps that you can do. Then the red is our tier 3, and the tier 3 is your classic ABAP, right? So this is where we're doing things that we always have, and that's what we don't want to do. We want to avoid that at all possible for new things. Obviously, most likely if you're a current customer, you have plenty of that on your system. And we'll talk about how to start moving from that. So let's talk about tier one, just a little bit more detail. 2, we talked about developer extensibility, so that's a full ABAP experience. You still are limited what you can do within that space in terms of how you can interact with the actual SAP system. But other than that, it's a full ABAP experience using at least their new technologies like RAP and stuff. You're not going to build reports like you used to or things like that. It's a little different from that perspective, but you're going to build backends for Fury apps and things along those lines. But then from day one, there's been some version of key user extensibility, which is really more towards a super user and not a technical user, or at least that's the intent. And this is where you can make changes to the interface, maybe expose certain data for analytics, create forms, emails, create a few fields in the database, put a little bit of logic, but it's really not a development experience. Doesn't have the full life cycle that you would expect from your extensive thing. So it's really geared towards the key user where they really need to just enhance their process a little bit within a very conformed scope. And then side by side, we'll talk about a little bit more on that. Of course, BTP is the premier, platform for doing something as a side-by-side application SAP. It provides a lot of starter accelerators to get that done, but that's not a limit, right? We're just calling APIs just like you could from any other system. So there's no limit to building it on BTP. As a vendor or as a customer, you could build solutions on AWS, or it could be a mix, right? There might be certain things where you want to take advantage of something on AWS, on Azure, or it could be a partner that you're working with as well that provides some API that you want to consume. You can do that through Integration Hub. You can do that directly in your app. So that really is gives you a lot of options, but you are outside, it's side by side. You're not directly in, you're having to rely on those public APIs to do that. You can, though, if you think about it, you can take that tier one on stack and build APIs there that then you might work with your side by side. So there is that blended where you could use both of the tier one technologies. So where is it applicable? If you're on public cloud, congratulations, you're already clean. You couldn't have done anything that wasn't clean outside of that. So that's been there for a while, but in terms of the developer extensibility, which has become a very important part of this clean core story, that's been released on 22.08 release of the public cloud, I believe. For private cloud and on-premise, that on-stack extensibility is still there. So you can continue to build in those environments. You can build things outside of that on-stack extensibility, but going forward, the best practice is going to be, hey, we have it now. We're on these releases. We should start looking at where we can start doing that extensions that we're doing inside that developer extensibility, so embedded steampunk, and not in our classic ZY customer namespaces. So yeah, again, public cloud, you're good to go. You're clean. But if you're on the private cloud or you're on premise, if you really are trying to do a true digital transformation, which is that ability to really interact with anything in the cloud and potentially even move to the cloud, you really need to be thinking that this is the direction we need to go. And how do we do that? It's a journey, right? This is not an immediate, you can't just flip a switch and become clean, right? It's a painful, especially depending on the length of time that you've had these systems. And I mean, SAP is releasing things regularly. So this is not that everything's available for you to do right now. But the goal here is that we can slowly start moving in that path. And SAP offers tools for doing so. So one is, if you have extensions that you're not really using or there's little value, you're not getting any value in your business to those extensions, start rolling them back. Try to remove them where possible. Clean that data as often as possible as you can. So if you have some initiatives to start cleaning up some of your data, that would be a wonderful start. You really need to be aware of what is not clean. So you need to have tools, and we'll at least go over them in a bit. Where are your technical debts? Where are those problems? And then start coming up with strategy how you're going to attack those specific problems. If you're creating new extensions, they should be clean. That should be your goal. I mean, obviously, it's not always going to be possible, but that should be your starting point. And then you should then figure out is it maybe there's a tier 2 where there's a path to clean core with that extension. It may not be clean right now, but we know how we're going to get it clean. And then obviously there are going to be current extensions that you still need. So how do we start looking at that? Maybe making them tier 2 as well, or saying, hey, you know what, we could redo that. And so start putting that on your sprints. Start trying to get that involved in your current updates to code and stuff. And then obviously, and this has been true from ever, but it's more and more important is do not make modifications on your system. That's going to be the hardest thing to extend. So resources for doing this. Again, there's a business accelerator hub. They've changed the name of that several times, but the addresses have generally been the same, api.sap.com. This is where you can find those released public APIs if you're doing side-by-side extensions and are not doing anything on the developer extensibility on the system itself, but then also you can find all of your released private APIs. So that's everything from those business objects I talked about, baddies, CDS views that are available, events. That's another important thing. Events that you can then capture both for public and for private. Events you can capture and then handle in your system. So maybe a business partner gets created that might trigger something in your side-by-side application to do some work. On that same website, there's a form for influencing SAP on what APIs you need. So whether that's, when I say APIs again, that could be a baddie. That could be a business object or something within a business object that doesn't currently work. Maybe there's they have a business object for business partner, but something with addresses is not quite what you need that you could do in the regular system. Then talking about analyzing your current systems and understanding what your current system is how clean is it. They have a clean core dashboard. It's a Fury app that you can use on your system. It will then give you how clean are you and give you those insight onto the different applications and maybe that your extensibility was not clean. And then you can start working towards cleaning those things up. So it helps you prioritize, maybe identifies these things you didn't even realize were in there. And you go, hey, we don't need that anymore. It's a process we don't use. Or maybe it's a process we can adopt as the standard one and no longer have our extension. So that's a very important tool for people who are on current systems to start working in this direction. And then there's a ABAP Test Cockpit, has some check variants specific to clean core. So any new code that comes out that you're developing, you may think it's clean. You then run it through this, it will tell you, no, you're doing something outside what we consider clean. So you can start pushing back on developments, whether internal or external, on whether it's clean or not. Okay. So that's the overall clean core. What it means is really, from an SAP perspective. But as I mentioned, this is important to Aicomp in the sense that we want our next-gen products to be clean core compliant. So we're embracing it from the beginning on that end. So Cubicus, you may not have heard of that term before or that product, but that's our next generation engine for packaging. On our BTP cloud system, it's a multi-tenant cloud application. We've built it on BTP, but we will continue starting off as a side-by-side using a lot of released public APIs, but we will continue to look at opportunities within the on-stack development to integrate even more closely with the SAP processes so that we have that same awesome experience that we have on our current VC Power Pack on-premise private cloud solutions. But we will be clean core with all those decisions. Each one of those will be a clean core. So we will make sure that those integrations stay clean. And long-term benefit of this for us is that we're not having to make different integrations for every single flavor of S4, right? If we stay clean, even if we're doing things on the developer extensibility piece of that, we should be able to deliver that to each one of those systems as long as you're on a newer release of S4. So we're no longer constrained by different people having different flavors of systems. We should be able to provide our product regardless of the S4 system. So this is just a quick overview of what that integration looks like. So you can see on the left is S4HANA. We have the various modules of S4, just like you normally have. And instead of us directly integrating into those modules like we do now with our on-premise and private cloud products, we will be using those public APIs for doing a lot of and eventing to do a lot of the transfer of master data and identifiers as to what is being actually stored in Cubicus. And then we're going to be able to push those results back to the system And then that system will be able to run with those bill of materials and routing, which is the core of the process that we're working with. And there's a lot of resilience in that as well, right? So now the system has its materials, its bombs, its routings, and it can go ahead and produce those. And while you're utilizing this to really build that up, it is sitting outside the system, and it is outside your upgrade cycle whether it's S4 Cloud and you're getting those things on a regular basis, upgrades on a regular basis, or you're getting or you're local and you have a private cloud contract where you have to get those updates regularly. You're not having to put Aicomp on the list as to reasons why you need to do additional testing. So